Welcome to the Charity Matters podcast. Mr. Rogers' mother said, always look for the helpers. I'm Heidi Johnson, nonprofit founder, lifelong helper, and your host. I've been interviewing the helpers for a decade with my blog, and I'm so excited to finally be sharing these inspiring conversations with our new podcast. Join me as we learn the challenges and stories of innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern-day heroes who set out to solve the problems of humanity. Today, our guest is Abeni Carr, who is the founder of Haven House, and I'm so excited to share her amazing journey and our inspirational conversation. Thank you, Abeni, so much for being here today. I'm so excited to get to know you and a little bit more about Haven House, and I'm especially excited that you are also an alma mater of my high school. We come from the same place, which really breeds pretty special people. So I'm really excited to meet you and to learn about Haven House. So tell us a little bit about what Haven House does.
Yeah, for sure. We really support homeless youth, specifically. A lot of focus goes to high school age youth that are dealing with housing instability, but we provide just advocacy, resources. So we make hygiene packets. We also help with young people getting housing. We've helped with young women who've been trafficked, making sure that they're getting to safety, making sure they get lawyers if they need it. We try to pay for some of their fees. And we're hoping to expand to have a community center where we can really have our clothing closet and be able to support high school age youth, which I think is one of the most vulnerable populations. And so we started doing this work in 2018, and now we are in 3 different areas throughout LA County.
Wow. That's 2018. You're already in. That's incredible. Also, Our homeless population just keeps booming in Los Angeles, and COVID did not make it any better. I think it made it worse for so many families that were already living on the margins, and I think it just took a lot of people to just a tragic place. So you don't just wake up and start a nonprofit. It doesn't usually happen that way. Mm-hmm. There's a series of things that lead you to it. And I don't know if it's a calling, but I think a lot of people feel that they get called to the work. So how did you happen to start youth homeless nonprofit? That's just, you don't just magically say, oh, this is what I want to do when I grow up. So what was the path? Tell us the backstory.
I am an educator. I've been a principal for many years. And about 6 years ago, I decided to go on a search looking for my biological family. I was adopted when I was 3 by my mom. And I purposely waited until I was 30 to look for my biological family. And I found both my birth mother and my birth father about 6 years ago. And it really was just a surreal moment. I found them through a lot of Google searches on Facebook.
Thank God for Google.
And so I found them through Facebook, and immediately we reunited. And then about a year later, we went through the process of meeting my siblings on both sides. And from my birth mother, her daughter, my sister Miracle, at the time lived in Texas. And so she decided to come out and meet me because she always knew about me, but we had never met. And so when she came to LA to meet me, she came with a gentleman, and we met, and it was my very first time meeting her, but the guy that she was with kept answering all of her questions. And at the time I had no idea about trafficking culture or anything that goes with that, just the authority and the dominance over a person, right?
Right.
This was my very first time meeting her. And she said this was her boyfriend. But anytime I'd ask her a question, he would answer it. And so I thought it was very odd. And so just through talking to her and my mother, that's how I found out that my sister was being trafficked. And so that night, we begged her, come with us, do not go back to Texas with this person. And I thought, as a principal, I could get her in school because she hadn't gotten her diploma. And I could help her with housing, and, we could change all of this,
Right.
And I really just had no idea the disparities and the gaps, that are within the system, and so because my sister had been in foster care and ran away from foster care and had not been under the care of my mother for so many years because she had been in and out of jail,
Right.
there was a gap in like, how do you get transcripts, to even get her enrolled?
Wow.
And something I'd never even thought of. And
Right.
in housing, she was on a wait list for 2 months, and so we would go do intakes, but nobody would take her. And so because I begged her to come out here, I was like, just come stay with me. And so she did. She stayed with me for 2 months until we could get her into housing. And looking back, I now know mental health should have been a priority before I decided to like help her. And
Right.
so we finally got her in school. We got her in housing, partnered her with some mental health organizations, and she was able to graduate from high school. And it was great to be able to help her. But I know that if I wasn't there to advocate, if I wasn't there to be adamant, even just in her getting an ID, if I wasn't
Right.
there to help her, I know she would have gave up, and I know she would have went right back to that.
And the bureaucracy is so overwhelming. It's roadblock after roadblock, and it's confusing, and especially when you're young.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have the skills, to navigate through that.
Yeah. And like, she's resilient, like there's so many things that she's gone through in her life that she is such a resilient person. But if you don't know that you could give pushback, or if you don't know what your rights are, it's very easy to say, when somebody tells you no, say, oh, well, I guess I can't do that, and I have to kind of go back to this, right? And so I ended up helping her, and it really made me like turn around and look at my students and identify, like, do I have students that are homeless, and maybe we don't know.
Right.
And so at my school, I started doing just the work, of really figuring out how do we identify our students. And, sure enough, I did have some students that I had no idea had been dealing with housing instability, because people don't willingly come to a school and say, hey, we're dealing with homelessness.
No. And there's such shame with it. And
yes.
There's such shame. And in high school, when you just want to be embraced and like everybody else, I can see how it'd be so easy to not want to admit, oh, that's me. That's the last thing I think you want to do.
Yeah, but there's also a fear, like for parents, right? Like if I tell the school that we are dealing with housing instability, will you take my children, And so you really have to work on building that trust where people feel comfortable saying, I need help, and build systems that are able to help them, whether it's housing or whether it's transportation or food, And so I started telling people about my story, and then they just started referring people to me. And I was like, okay, I guess
it's just one person. You're being your principal, and all of a sudden you're becoming a personal like housing manager, case manager.
Yeah.
You mean social worker, right?
Yeah, on top of my job.
Okay, so you are being like an individual social worker. People are coming to you and being sent to you. And then do you say, oh my gosh, if this is just happening at my school, I mean, what's the moment when you're thinking, I need to do something more here?
I think the moment when there was one day, like on a Thursday, where I got like 5 phone calls, and it was for different needs. Some people needed like a hotel to stay at, and so I was like, here's money, because we didn't have vouchers. And then there was another family that was living in a car, and the school had just found out and asked me like, hey, do you know where they could get help? And I think just with the multitude of phone calls, I was like, there's a great need, And so I really just started reaching out to everybody I know, and I through social media, and said like, does anybody know agencies? And so I started creating like a directory of agencies to work with. And then somebody said, hey, I know a young person who is dealing with housing instability, but their counselor won't help them apply for college. And I was like, oh, I can do that because I've been doing it. And so we ended up getting a cohort of about like 10 young people, and we just helped them with the college application process. And so that was about 2 years ago, where it was like, okay, let's do this. And I have a group of crazy friends who really support any crazy ideas I have. And
so, the best kind of friends to have.
Yes. And so they were like, whatever you need, we can do a college workshop, we can donate money, we can give clothes. And so we just came together and said like, let's help out as many people as we can. And that's how Haven's House got started.
So you went and got a 501c3 and made it official.
Yeah.
Are you still a principal?
I am still a principal.
You have, two major jobs.
Yeah. I'm a principal right now, and I'm also doing my doctoral program at Pepperdine. So I'm getting ready to do my last year. But a lot of what I'm researching is just policy about, how do we create these systems to help high school age homeless youth. Wow.
I'm so beyond blown away. I mean, I already knew you were special because you started a nonprofit and because you went to a fantastic high school. But I can't even believe that you're getting a doctorate on top of all this and you still have a full-time job.
Yeah.
So when I ask you the question, what your biggest challenges are with your nonprofit, what do you think that is?
I think that, when you stumble into doing a nonprofit, it's not like I woke up and this is what we're going to do.
Everybody stumbles into them, by the way.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think
it happens. That's just the way it is.
It does. It's like, how do we create this as an agency, right? I'm learning how do you build capital and how do you get a building? And so I think one of our biggest things is I've been doing most of the work out of my house or out of other people who let me use their buildings. And so one of the things we want to do now is build our own community center, where we have a go-to place that's stable, where we can do a shelter and have college workshops and just be a resource to the community. And so I think one of our biggest challenges right now is we want to find space in LA to create our flagship, our place where people can come if they need the help.
Awesome. I have some thoughts for you offline that I will tell you. I have an idea. I just popped into my head, but I think I might know somebody who can help you. Okay. I'm not sure, but we'll see. I run a nonprofit as my day job, so I have a lot of great funding resources, so I might have an idea. So I always say that the bucket is heavy with this work. It's hard. I mean, the work is hard. And we obviously we don't do it for the money. We do it for a bigger purpose. There's a calling. We're here to serve each other, and that's why we do this work. But when you're studying, when you've had a long day at work, when you still got to do your laundry, when life is just the bucket's heavy is what I say. Mm-hmm. What fuels you to keep going?
I got into education a long time ago, not because of, the honors or the pay. So I think I've always been in this space of it's not about, what you're going to get back from it. But I will tell you, to see this cohort that we have right now, to see every single one of them, all 12 of the people that we're working with got into college. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And they're all, we're giving them the tools of how do you advocate for yourself when you do go to college, or how do you get a job? We've helped 5 of them get jobs. We are really trying to end cyclical homelessness. And so one of our board members actually was one of our clients, and now she's, 24 years old, and she has a job. She's living on her own, and her, every day she's like, what can I do to help? And so I think that that's what really reminds you of why are we doing this? Because it's kind of that each one teach one model, right? If you can help people with the tools to get on their feet, then they too will turn around and help somebody else out, right? So
they'll pay it forward.
Absolutely. You want to take it from cyclical homelessness to cyclical equity. And so
I love that.
That's really what I'm focused on right now. And that's kind of my why. So when there's those hard days or those I'm exhausted days, I remember Marie, and I remember other young people that I've been able to help out and that have turned around and now become amazing advocates for other young homeless youth, that now they're helping and they're mentoring and they're being able to share their experience and say, this is temporary. You can make it through this. Right. And so that's
the moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That is beautiful. So I have this love-hate word I think most nonprofits do with the word impact, because we're always held to a standard and accountability, which is great. And we always have to measure how many we serve, how much we raise, the impact on that.
Yeah.
But when you change a child's life who doesn't have a home and doesn't have a path forward to college or a career, I mean, I don't know how you measure that, but what would you say your impact is? It doesn't have to be numbers. It doesn't have to be quantitative. It can be qualitative.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because it's, as a principal, it's one of the things I always talk to my staff about of like, you're not going to be able to touch every single person that you work with. And that's, some people just aren't ready, at that time. And with the population we're serving, they're dealing with, substance abuse, addiction, they're dealing with, this may have been something they dealt with for a very long time. With my sister, she had been experiencing housing instability as well as like trust issues for over 10 years, and so now you're saying, trust me, and I'm just this other person, and I'm finding that with a lot of our people that we work with, that trust is difficult. And sometimes they're like, what are you getting out of this? So they're not, they're very reluctant to kind of take your resources. And so I don't really measure impact on like, I know I just talked about like, hey, we got 12 people, in college, but I really do measure impact by the amount of people we're able to reach out to. And sometimes it's an introduction. Sometimes it's pairing them with another organization. I'm never like, everybody has to do Haven's House, right? Like there may be another organization that's able to help. So really I measure impact on the amount of people we're able to touch and connect. And that doesn't have to be the Haven's House, right? It may be a shelter another shelter that they can go to, or maybe a case manager that touches them a little bit differently than my team. So I really do measure impact on the amount of people we're able to connect with.
And I love that you're also, besides obviously you're impacting their lives, but I love that you're connecting them to other organizations. And I think that so many nonprofits, and I think so many of us live in silos. We just think, I'm doing this, tunnel vision. And there's 40,000 nonprofits in Los Angeles, and many are trying to accomplish the same objective. And the fact that you are wise enough to reach out to connect all these dots, because not everybody can meet every need of every person and meet them where they are, right?
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah. And I think it's important to like have that self-reflection. Like we're not big enough. There's other agencies that might be able to do a more robust support system than we can, I also think, we're dealing with minors for the most part. And so oftentimes they're very invisible because people assume that, they're having parental support, and so we're kind of uncovering what the needs are of minors 13 through 18, right? There's a lot of focus in LA on 18 through 25-year-olds, what we call transitional age youth or TAY. But there hasn't been a lot of support for minors, and COVID made that even more difficult, right? Because there's so many liabilities that are part of that. And so I think that's why connection does become important, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I've learned that as an educator. I don't want to waste time reinventing the wheel. If somebody else has it better, then I'd rather partner, with them. But I think there's so many amazing people that are doing great work that, if I find out somebody's doing something, I'm like, how are you doing that? And I just want to soak up all that knowledge, not to be competitive, but just to say like, okay, there's a better support, to make more connections for our clients.
But I think that one of the hardest challenges in the nonprofit space is knowing we can't save and help everybody. Yeah. And I think you said that about as a teacher, you learned that early on teaching. Yeah. And I think for a lot of us in the nonprofit space, it takes us a long time to realize that. And it's a really hard lesson. Whether I'm sure it is with your teacher as well, because we're innately wired to want to serve more, help more, give more, do more. And you just can't always help everybody.
Yeah, I think I learned that early with my sister. I wish that I had connected her with mental health services, really just to deal with the trauma that she'd experienced. My sister and I, we're good. We still are in contact with each other, but she's an adult and she makes her own choices. And sometimes those are the easier choices, right? As compared to the choices I would have for her. And so, you have to allow people, you can give them the tools, but sometimes they don't know how to use those tools. And sometimes some people are just, it's hard to do all the work, you know? And so I realized very early on, just from working with my sister, but also my students, of like, it doesn't mean you give up. It doesn't mean you look at it as a failure, right? But I do take like a lasting impact. You know, now when I'm working with young people, the first thing I try to do is pair them with mental health, you know, because I think that if I had done that first with my sister, we probably would have been a little bit more successful with her, right? So that becomes really important to me. And I also think, again, talking to other people about like, what does your model look like, right? Because maybe there is a different way to do things. And there's everlasting, all this research that keeps coming out, right? Even the research I'm doing. So we're always finding new ways to build trust and then support, you know, youth that are dealing with housing instability. Trust is huge.
And change and trust is slow. It's not an overnight instant thing that happens. You don't instantly trust someone. You don't instantly change. It's a process.
Yeah.
It's a process, and there's a lot of patience that goes with that. And there's a lot to keep them on the track and keep showing them who they can be and where they can go, I think is really inspiring, and hard work. Having had 3 teenage sons and just teenagers in general. And I run a youth leadership organization where I deal with hundreds of teenagers. And I love, teenagers are my favorite. Like if I had to pick an age group, that's my sweet spot also. But I love them, but they can be challenging and tricky sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Just a little tricky sometimes. It just kind of depends. So if you could dream any dream at all for Haven House, what would that be?
Oh, I know my dream. I want to be able to build a campus that has a school, a mental health, and a community center and housing. I want kind of like a one-stop shop where we build a community where students know it's a safe place for them. And, you know, I think everybody, you know, we go through that like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's really true, right? Like if we can build the safety, the home, you know, the access to food, then, you know, that's the first step to even get them to that next place. So I would love one day to be able to have really like our own little community where on the same campus, there's schooling, there's shelter, there's a community center. We help them with job readiness. And, you know, we have a community of just caring people that pour into our young people. And so I want to open my own school and, you know, our community center, because I know from my school, you know, I've worked here for 8 years. We've built community and we've built family. And, you know, I have so many alumni who just came last week to my school that come back to see me. And, you know, we get to talk about their wins and some of their, you know, their areas of opportunities, but they know that it's always love, you know, and something that all of my students tell me is like, Ms. Carr, you know, whether I'm doing good or not, you know, you've always loved me. You've always supported me. And so I want to be able to do a very similar community for a lot of the people that we help now.
So do you have a motto or phrase that you live by?
Oh, I have so many. I mean, I love African proverbs. But no, I think I don't say like every kid can succeed, but I think that like one of my models is like, it's everyone's responsibility to ensure equity. And I think that that's something that like as adults, oftentimes we're the gatekeepers. And so we are in charge of like, hey, what systems and what rules am I imposing to eliminate, you know, equity, right? Like we really have to be honest with looking at ourselves. And then just to say, like I said, even with my students, you know, once they've made it, hey, it's your job now to also ensure that equity and use your voice, you know?
Right.
And so I think that's something that I truly believe in. It's all over.
I love that. I thought you might say actions, not words, but that's our high school.
Yes, always actions.
But obviously you're living that life. It's very, very abundantly clear. So you definitely follow. You definitely were taught well. So what do you think the life lessons are in all of this? I mean, there's so much that happens. I think that we're in a privileged spot. And I think even as an educator, you're in a privileged spot to witness, I would say, the best and worst of humanity. I often say that we have kind of a front row seat, and dealing with homeless youth and you definitely see all of it, right? You see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there's lessons in all of that. So what do you think you've learned since starting this in 2018?
Oh man, I've learned so much. I've learned more than anything as a principal, right? Like I said, I had no idea how many of my students were dealing with difficulties, and so I think, the word you talked about, privilege, is so important. Oftentimes when we're making systems, we're not listening to the voices that are impacted by our systems, right? We're creating this idea and we're like, this will be great. And we're not including the voices of those who are immediately impacted by it. So I've learned the importance of student voice. And I've learned that in order for people to feel that they could use their voice, they have to feel like they're in a safe place. And so a lot of when I'm working with any of my clients or my students, I'm very informal. I'll say, tell me about yourself. And I think that whenever I just kind of sit back in my chair and I'm like, tell me about yourself, I've had kids go on for like hours about like everything. And one of the things that all my staff jokes with me about at work is like, how did you get them to tell you all that? And I'm like, I just listen. I'm not interjecting. I'm not judging them, and I've had students in gangs tell me that they're involved. I've had them tell me things that they're probably shouldn't,
Right.
But they know that, hey, I'm going to take you as you are, so I've really learned the importance of creating a safe space so students can use their voice. And then I think the other thing I've really learned importance is modeling what it means to stand up for other people. And I think that that's super important because a lot of times when we do nonprofits or when we're in education, we want to tell everybody what to do, right? And we want to say like, hey, this is how you got to get it done. But we also have to model for people, this is how you handle this situation so that they can do it, And so I think whenever we're in a tough situation, whether it's in courts or whether it's getting them housing, and I'll give one example really briefly. I had a young person who was trying to get a caseworker so they could get like benefits from the county. And the person they were speaking to was like, no, we're done for the day, and kind of cut them off. And one of the first things that, the client did was like they went off, emotionally just went off. And it is very hard for them to kind of, who already feels like everything's against them, to then calmly react to somebody, And so I took them back up to the window and we talked with the person, and I didn't do the talking. I allowed them to do the talking, right? And kind of just held her hand and was just like, breathe, and walked her through it. And afterwards, it was great to have that conversation with her of like, this is the first time I've learned how to kind of control my emotions. But it's, like a week ago, she's in college now. And so she said, my professor tried to tell me that because I didn't log into Zoom, they weren't going to count this assignment. And so, I just did this thing where I breathed and I calmly started walking them through, what I wanted to say, kind of like we did that time we went down to the county building. And so it's just so important that, we learn how to show people how to model like what it is that they need to do and not just take over for them. So,
and you're giving them the tools. You're not just giving them the fish, you're giving them the pole.
Yeah, for sure. Because I can't be there all the time. So
that's right. I don't think so. I think you're a little busy there, Beatty. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you think you've changed in the last couple of years since doing all of this? Do you think you've changed?
Yeah, for sure. I am, and, maybe came from my Mayfield drive, but such an A-type, like, you're like, I want to get this done and, just very goal driven. And I think that this work has really showed me how to slow down and really listen to people. Everybody really does have a story, and sometimes we're like, we got to get this done. That I think as a leader, I didn't really take out the time when I was younger, to really hear people out. And I felt like my way was the right way because I thought this out and this is great.
You're my people, by the way.
But I think in working with kids, you learn, like, especially when you're slowing down to hear their voice, right? So I've really learned to kind of like slow down and like delegate, and trust people. Just like I'm asking my young people to trust me, you have to start trusting other people that they can get it done.
And you think that that's how you've changed the most, is just through listening and trusting people and back to modeling. If they're going to trust you, you're going to,
I just think the importance of slowing down. I think I was always like very goal oriented, and being in education, you do have to, right? Like you have all these deadlines that you have to meet, so that's not a fake thing, right? But I've definitely learned how to be more collaborative, whether it's with other agencies, whether it's with other people that are working on my team. Like I've learned to be a lot more collaborative, but that comes from the slowing down and the listening to people for sure.
Right. And realizing, I think, too, that we can't do it all.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was our high school, like I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar, and we were kind of in an environment where we could do and be anything we want. And I think one of the flip sides of that is that there's a point when you realize you can't do it all, and we need each other, right? Because basically, like you said, you're building community, and that's what you're doing. You're building community. And that's what all nonprofit work is, right?
Yeah. And I think with leadership, you evolve. You know, when I became a principal, I was 29, and really just was like, okay, we have to do all these things, you know, and I think when you're younger, you're worried about like how people will look at you, you know, and as you get older, you're not really necessarily worried about everybody's opinion so much as you are about like the work, you know, and so I think that changes over time too.
Wow. I mean, I'm first and foremost blown away by all that you were doing, full-time being a principal, getting your doctorate. That in itself would put me over the deep end, and running a nonprofit and helping and serving all of these kids. I mean, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. And the work you're doing is so beautiful and so inspiring and so needed as we see more and more homeless, especially in Los Angeles, but across the country. It's growing. And I think giving these students the tools early enough to find a path out before they've gone too far down to a place that it's harder to come back from is just a brilliant model, which I wish there was more people like you doing this work, because we just are really all here to serve each other and to help each other. And you are doing such a beautiful job.
Thank you.
So tell us where we can support you, how we can donate, how we can volunteer, what you need, all those good things, where we can find you.
Yeah, so we are indeed we have a website up, and it's www.havens.youthservices.org. We're also on Instagram, and that's at Havens House YS. And we're also on Facebook, and I'm also on those as well. And all of our links are on PayPal, on our website. And I think every month we've been focusing on something different. So like last month we were doing welcome home kits for people that we were moving in to housing. And so we did 20 of those. And so for the month of May, we're really going to focus on opening up our community center. So we're looking for donations for like our computer lab. We obviously are still doing our raising capital to get our building.
Right.
And in March, we focused on our clothing closets, but all of them are fully full, like full of so many clothes. We got so many donations. But we'll probably be doing that again in July, another clothing drive. So on our website, we actually have a lot of the projects that are coming up, so people can always look there too.
Oh, that's so great. Because I think people often think like, oh, it's a hard time for me financially right now, or, oh, I don't think people don't realize what a significant difference just one little thing is. I mean, whether it's clothing or saying, oh my gosh, I have this thing in my bathroom of all these, I rated the maid card at a hotel, and I have all this soap and toothpaste and shampoos, and they think that, oh, that's not a big deal, but it is a big deal.
It is.
It is when a child doesn't have a way to take a shower or brush their teeth or have all the supplies they need. Something as small as that is super significant for them.
Yeah, we did that last year. We were doing like purses filled with like hygiene stuff in there, and we were giving it to young ladies. And it is important, like some of the things that we take for granted that we have every day. Some people don't have access or means to get it.
I love that. Well, I am hoping that everybody listening is going to be going to your site and helping and donating. And I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation. You are such a bright light, and you are doing such beautiful work. So thank you, Ebony. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I really enjoyed talking to Ebony Carr about what it takes to start a business that changes people's lives. I think her comment about just listening was so inspiring and true. To learn more about modern-day heroes like Ebony, or if you'd like to reach out to us, visit us at charitymatters.com or connect with us on Instagram at charitymatters. If you enjoyed our conversation, we would love it if you shared this with your family and friends. Remember that together we can make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time.